Welcome back to the Plunge with Purpose podcast, where we talk about all things freediving in the ocean and the springs. Today, we're diving in with a true springs expert and owner of Aquatrek Expeditions. He's an expedition leader as well as a seasoned freediving instructor dedicated to sharing his knowledge and passion for the water. In this episode, we'll be exploring the different courses that he offers, some freediving techniques, the physical and mental benefits of freediving, as well as addressing some conservation issues that are impacting the delicate systems of Florida's springs. So let's dive in. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Plunge with Purpose podcast, where we talk about all things freediving. And today I have with me Dave from Aquatrek Expeditions. Welcome, Dave.
Thank you so much.
Absolutely, good to have you.
Yeah, very happy to be here.
You are a freediving instructor and expedition leader.
Yes.
So really happy to have you here. I personally love your freedive training style. I've loved the training that I've done with you, and definitely you came to mind when I thought about who to have on here in terms of, great tips and tricks that you've given me, kind of actually funny stuff that you've done under the water that has gotten me out of my head, and then the expedition part. So really excited to dive into all that today.
Oh man, I'm excited. It's going to be fun. I can't wait to talk about all this.
So just starting us off, talking about instruction. So freedive training. I actually don't know all the different levels that you do. I know that you're PADI, right?
Mm-hmm. Yep. And I teach level 1, level 2. And I also am working on level 3. You have to teach a certain amount of students in each bracket to teach the next one. And yeah, I have like a very heavily weighted group of students. I've taught like 90% level 1s because I really am very passionate about, I get to be the guy who like rolls out the red carpet and shows people the underwater world, which is just like an insane privilege to me because I have such love for the underwater world. So I've done a lot of level 1s.
Oh, cool. Okay. And when you do your training, just to give everyone an idea of where you are, you're in North Florida. Would you say that you do most of your certs up in the Gainesville area, or where do you primarily train?
I'm willing to travel to train anywhere. I've had students travel from the West Coast and from New York and upper states to make their way down here. But my general stomping grounds is Gainesville, Florida, North Central Florida. Anywhere within a couple hours of there is where you can find me most of the time.
Awesome. Okay, very cool. So for instruction, I guess I'd be curious to know, I feel like I know the answer because it's what I struggled with too. What would you say are like the most common struggles that your new freedivers have? Because you have so many level 1s. What are they all struggling with primarily?
It's funny. A lot of people, when they first get into freediving, or if they don't know much about it, they get nervous about the wrong parts. They worry that they're going to have too small of a breath hold. Yeah, I've heard plenty of people tell me, I can't even hold my breath for 30 seconds. And then once you get them in the pool, they're holding their breath for 2 minutes, 2.5 minutes.
Right. Okay.
But the stuff that we don't think about becomes the hard part. People start to sometimes have issues with popping their ears and equalizing the pressure as they descend.
That was my experience ears for sure. I had, after having trained with you, I had a bit of a different like level 1 experience. So I did FII, which your level 1 is a 70-foot dive right out the gate. And so it was a great class, loved the instruction, but it was very methodical of like, you will dive 5 meters and then you will dive 10 meters and then you will do 15 meters and then you'll reach your 70 feet. And it was starting out with free immersion and then to bifin. And I had just been introduced to freediving when I got into that level 1. So I definitely picked up some bad habits just to get down to the plate. So that was my fault. I should have done a little bit more work on the back end before jumping into that. But yeah, I think I was like doing a Valsalva Frenzel combo just to get down there, and it took a while to get out of that. But my assumption would be that like most new freedivers struggle with equalization because it tends to be like the majority of all the YouTube videos you see, and so many are like troubles with equalizing, like here's what to do.
Yes, 100%. And that's one of the reasons that I'm grateful to teach for Patty, because one of the things that I love about Patty's level one course is that it's really beginner friendly.
Mhm.
30 feet is all you need to dive to get certified in level one. And I like that because as an instructor, my challenge isn't to take people who already know how to free dive and then just watch them free dive to the target depth. My goal and my challenge and my passion lies in taking people who think they can't do it, or maybe they have very big roadblocks, and taking the time to get them down, 5, 10 feet at a time, at their pace, and listen to my students so that I can help them, delete these roadblocks. I like smaller classes. I like working with people individually. I like private training because not everybody has the privilege of diving 70 feet in a weekend. Some people, that might take 6 months. That might take a year. I want everyone to be able to do this sport. And that means I might have to slow down a little bit for some people, but I really love it because then those victories are just that much more impactful.
Yeah, and I think when you do, I guess I'll call it, for lack of a better term, like the baby step technique, where you really just master those first like 10 meters and just do that on repeat, it leads to what I feel would be so much more solidified, like basics, which
Mhm.
in order to go deeper comfortably and safer. So yeah, I enjoy now, now years into
Yeah.
diving, that's kind of where I'm at, is I went back to baby steps and back to the beginning, and it resonates better with me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's good.
There's a lot of footwork you got to put in. There's a lot of things that people don't learn in their level one that they should. Like I've noticed there's some basic skills that people are missing after they've taken their level one or even their level two. And what I'm seeing is, if you had been taught things like proper head position, how to clear the water out of your mask if it gets kicked off of your face, those are, pretty basic skills, but you really, if you're hyper focused, you got to go 70 feet on this weekend. There might be things that you just didn't hit because that's a big ask for your students.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think also doing the research on the different types of certifications out there, because we say level one, and if you're super new to freediving, you think level ones are all the same across the board. But just off the top of my head, we've got yeah, it's PADI, Molchanovs, FII. Like there's so many different
Yeah.
certifiers out there. So for anybody listening who's considering getting certified, look into each one and find like a best fit for you.
Yes, I totally agree. I think it has a lot to do with your coach. Finding a coach who is committed to continuing their own instruction, make sure that they're at the cutting edge. One who is connected very well with the freediving community, so spends time with some like elite freedivers, one of the top freedivers in the world, learning from them. That would be the type of instructor that I would recommend. And also, another thing that I think about a lot with freediving instruction is it's really not about getting a cert at all. When you look at the big picture, the stuff that really changes your life about freediving, the love for the water, the comfort in the water, the self-esteem that comes from that. My courses and my relationship with my students are about my students and my clients. It's not about the certs. I don't care if they pass. I don't care if they fail. My goal is to see how far I can get them in 2 days.
Yeah, and it's going to be different for everybody. I think for me, like if I'm diving with people, I want them to be certified only because I know then that they've got some sort of safety knowledge if something goes
Sure.
wrong. Like I dive better when I know that someone's watching me.
Oh, I did. Let's say one of my students fails the course.
Okay?
I just taught a course last weekend where one person passed and two failed.
Okay.
But during the course, I was already telling them, look, like I could tell that they were missing some skills right off the bat. As soon as we got in the pool, I was like, man, this is going to be really tough. They're going to have to learn a lot, and they did. They improved so much during the course, but it wasn't quite enough to pass. So I told them, listen, this isn't the end of your road. This is the beginning. Here's the tools you need to make yourself better. Here's my recommendation to train in the pool on your own. Well, obviously not on your own, but yeah, just so you know, don't do this in the pool by yourself. Um, but that's, taking the certification course to me is just the beginning of that journey. It's not about a program, it's about a person.
Mhm.
And I find that, if people need to come back to me a couple months later after practicing for a little while and finish their level one, that's fine with me. We can get in the water, we'll get those skills checked off and get you your cert card.
Yep. Better to
Yeah.
do that than rush things along and important points are missed. It's a lot of information to even just cram
Mhm.
into a weekend, especially for people who are, very, very new to it. I'm sure some people come in and they've been diving or spearfishing, for years, and now they just do want to get the proper training.
That's a different type of student, by the way, because I get my people who've like only seen pictures of freediving, never tried it themselves, and then I get my students who have been doing it for years, and they come in and they're pretty sure they're not going to learn anything. I like those guys too because it's always fun to challenge them
I was
and
going to say challenge accepted.
yeah, see what we can do.
So you mentioned something where there's a lot of things that people miss, like the clearing of the mask or the head position. Without giving away too much, would there be any tips that you want to give to new freedivers who are struggling? Maybe they've done a level 1 course and didn't get a ton out of it, or they've done some day training. Like, what would be the main points that you always like to hit the first day that you train with someone?
Well, if someone is struggling, they weren't able to pass their course, um, the roadblocks are going to be pretty individual for different people. So because of that, instead of giving a blanket tip, what I would say would be find a coach, work with them privately, get private training, get the coach to look at you, because the thing about learning on YouTube is that YouTube video isn't going to be able to look at you in your form and say, listen, man, your legs are bending at the knee when you're kicking and you're losing all your momentum. Or I might not be able to look at another student and say, hey, I think you might be doing Valsalva when you're, I've seen students drop and not even touch their nose at all. And I'm like, what are you doing to equalize? Because I'm watching them dive. So the quickest way to learn is going to be, and the best way to learn is going to be to work with a coach, even if it's not a course. That being said, if you're out there and you don't have access to a coach, all you have is access to YouTube, you're wondering how to get started in freediving, I have a blanket tip I'm going to go ahead and give you right now, which is never dive alone. Don't try to figure it out. It doesn't matter how deep the water is, how shallow it is. I wouldn't freedive in a cup of water by myself. That being said, there are some things that people do tend to mess up early on pretty consistently. I would say the number one thing is they just don't think about how well they're resting before they dive. So a lot of times snorkelers, you'll see them kicking, they're trying to keep their head up and they're like, man, check it out. There's a sea turtle over there. And it's just so awesome. And you can hear that they're out of breath. And then they try to dive and they dive for like a second and they come right back up because they're exhausted. It's a lot of work to keep your head up in the water. So learning how to rest on the surface is a big deal for beginners.
Okay. Yeah, that's really helpful. And it's great diving into springs because you're not fighting currents. You don't have waves like crashing over your head.
Mhm.
Ocean diving, there's so many more obstacles with trying to relax at the surface if you're not in like a very flat lagoon. So yeah, the springs, you guys are blessed with that up there, having that calm water. I know sometimes some of the springs, there's a really heavy outflow. So that does push you back.
Or
Yeah.
a bunch of tubers.
Or a bunch of what?
Tubers.
Oh, like
Where
people
you breathe
fleeing
up
in
and
the
you,
river.
yeah, people like on a tube, like at Ginny Springs when you're about to try to take a dive and you just get bumped by an inner tube.
That's why I only go to Ginny in the winter, and I go like 7 a.m. I camp there, and then wake up the next morning and just go before anybody else is even awake.
You've got to stop giving away these secrets.
Okay,
They're gonna find us.
we'll come. So, I know you ish, but I don't know your background to freediving. So I'm actually quite curious, like where your entry point to freediving began. So can you fill me in a little bit on like your backstory?
Sure. This is actually how I start my level 1 course. I ask people what their earliest memories of water or being in the water were. I figure out how people are bonded with the water and what did that look like as they grow up. And what I find is most freedivers had access to water when they were younger. Not all of them, some of them don't, but that helps a lot. The more time you spend in the water as a youth, the more comfort you're going to build. And I had a neighborhood pool that I would go to all the time. The lifeguard would get really concerned about me, and he would ask my mom if I was okay. Um, But he tried to actually prohibit me from doing what I was doing because I was, he was right. I was taking risks. But I was a kid. I was like 6, 7, just sitting on the bottom of the pool having a good time. When I was 12, I became a scuba diver. My mom and my dad really wanted me to join them on their scuba adventures. So we did that as a family. It was really wholesome, really nice. Um, yeah, and then when I got to college, I took a break from diving. I just, focused on my studies, and I'd spent 10 years out of the water. Um, I had a big break, and I kind of found my way back at SeaWorld and Georgia Aquarium as an educator and a tour guide. Um, but I still was staying dry. I had the ocean all around me, but I was staying dry. And then I ended up moving to Gainesville, and I was just doing odd jobs at the time. I was actually selling refrigerators, and I was packing trucks for FedEx. Uh, and I was in Gainesville. I didn't really know where I was sitting. I was sitting on a gold mine. I didn't know. And one of my buddies who used to work with me at SeaWorld, he was like, "Hey, man, you live right near Ginny Springs. We should go." So I unboxed out of the storage unit my scuba gear and got the fins and snorkel, and I started pulling myself down on the limestone with him, and we ended up hitting 40 on our first day. I just used my snorkel and my fins from my scuba rig,
Okay.
and it was my first time really trying it because I'd seen my dad do it because he grew up in Puerto Rico. I'd seen him while I was snorkeling. I've seen him drop, and I was like, okay. So at that point, I'd maybe gone like 15 to 18 feet in the past. But I was like, okay, I got my buddy here. He's my best friend. We're gonna do this, and we just started seeing how far we could go. Um, then we just got obsessed with freediving, and we also got obsessed with the springs. So me and him ended up starting our springs conservation nonprofit together, and we started doing cleanups in the springs. So I had like 40, 50 people showing up to the springs to look for trash under the water. And we were pulling thousands of pounds. And I'm sitting here thinking to myself, my mom's a doctor, an ER doctor, and she's going, dude, have you heard about shallow water blackout? And I'm like, oh, don't worry about it, Mom. But I was just doing whatever I wanted. But then I started to realize after she was, my mom was telling me about this, I was like, maybe I have to be a in water safety leader. If I'm going to lead people into the water to clean, I have to know what I'm doing. So I got my level 1 cert, and then I got my level 2, and then I got my level 3, and then I became an instructor, and I just totally derailed. My life completely changed at that point. So it was a big moment for me, was going to Ginny that one day with my best friend.
Wow, that's so cool. Yeah, it's funny how I feel that the more freedivers I talk to, we all do have like that one aha moment where you're like, I really love this.
Mhm.
Clicks. But that's really cool. So you started more on like the conservation side and then worked freediving into the conservation.
I
That's pretty
didn't expect that. I didn't expect it. But one of the things that I noticed after my first freediving session, I was 28 years old, and I was struggling really hard with major depressive disorder and with anxiety at the time. Very low days for me. And those days lasted like I had weeks and weeks and weeks of lows. But then I went to the springs that day, and the boomerang of emotion was just like, bam. I was just all of a sudden I felt like myself. And I was like, I stayed happy like that. I stayed on that high for like 2 weeks after the dive.
wow.
And I got a master's in mental health. I used to be a professional mental health counselor.
Okay.
So I studied a lot of interventions and medications and therapies that you can use to help people's affect get boosted like that. And their efficacy is nothing like freediving. Freediving is way more effective than any sort of medication that I've ever been on, or any sort of medication that I've seen prescribed to somebody, or even a combination of medication and talk therapy.
Mm.
We, and there's science behind that too, because the same system of nerves that causes you to go into the mammalian dive reflex that hits you when you free dive with water on the face, your body shifts, but that same nerve system lights up during periods of euphoria and joy in your life. So if you're hearing that what I'm saying, you're putting it together. We are biohacking. When we dive, we are biohacking our brain to use those same pathways that we have during euphoria and joy.
Yep.
Holy cow. This
It's
is
incredible.
crazy.
Yeah. Anxiety, depression, also PTSD. PTSD has been very effective. PTSD treatment. Freediving has been very effective for that. So it's really amazing. And I'm an anxious person in general, so it's helped me with that. And it's funny because it's counterintuitive. I mean, there's some days where I'm like, I just can't relax. It's just not
Yeah.
happening. But for the most part, you come out of a dive and like my girlfriends and I will text each other afterwards and be like, man, like how full is your heart today? And it's just, you just radiate this joy. And I mean, that's honestly part of the reason why I'm doing this podcast. Like I have so much joy for the ocean, the springs, but then also just that euphoric feeling that you get from it. Like there's so much more to freediving than just the dive. So
Yeah.
I get it. That's such a beautiful story though. That's really cool.
Thank you. I'm privileged to have experienced it, and I've watched people with alcohol addiction. I've watched people with OCD, be able to fight or replace their addictions with freediving. And I know I got addicted to freediving. What you sure did too, I bet.
Yeah, totally obsessed. It's taken
Totally
over
obsessed.
every aspect of my life.
It doesn't matter if you're from China or from Russia or from South America or Africa or wherever you're from. If you do this sport, you will become addicted to it and it's going to change your life. I can say that with total confidence. If you want it, it's out there, you can go get it, and it's going to change your life.
I love that.
That's why I've decided to start to design a combination of psychotherapy and freediving retreat. Uh,
Oh, you know this.
Yes, yes, this is brand
Okay.
new. It's something I'm putting together with my psych background, and I think it's going to be my goal here is to change people's lives and to lead them to the water. I can't think of any better way to do that than to tackle mental health and freediving at the same time.
Wow, that's really exciting. And have you, like, is that something you're launching like this year? Have you already started it? Where are you at in the process?
Right now, I just started my company in July, so I'm
Okay.
solidifying my paddleboard rental programs, my expeditions, and I just did a retreat. I'm going to do another one in July. That's more of like sort of a camping style or just like a recreational retreat. I say just recreational, but it doesn't matter. If you're doing freediving, there's going to be mental health benefits. But the structure that I'm adding is something that's probably going to take me a couple more months to really lay out the itinerary and advertise. So I'm hoping for third quarter this year.
That's really cool. Well, definitely, I mean, keep me in the loop. I saw the recreation one that you did a few weeks ago and I couldn't make that one, but I'd love to be able to come up and join you guys for some of this. I saw campfire, guitar, and then obviously freediving. Like I'm sold.
Yeah, yeah. It's funny. Another thing that I would like to tell you is that there's another chance for you to come. It's going to be the weekend after 4th of July is our next retreat. And I did that one with Agali Moraes from the Georgia freediving community. So
Okay.
I'm helping him to give the Georgia freedivers a retreat to rally around. So bringing
That's
people down for that.
very
Um,
cool.
and also introducing them to Florida freedivers too, because there's a lot of we got about half and half of Georgia people and Florida people on that retreat. So it's
Okay.
nice.
Neat. Oh,
Yeah,
I look forward to that. I hope I can come.
that would be
Um,
really cool.
and
Yeah,
yeah, just send the details when you can, and I'll share it through my channels and hopefully get a good group going.
it'll be fun. I know that for sure.
Cool. Well, transitioning that wasn't on my radar. So now I want to get over to like almost like the third part of what you do, which is
Sure.
then Aquatrek.
Yeah.
So Aquatrek now is an expedition company, and I'll
Mhm.
let you, I mean, brief me.
Let's go.
Yes.
Okay. So my goal behind Aquatrek, just like my freediving training, I think that people's vacations and the way that they spend their off time, whether it be to celebrate an anniversary or to celebrate the life of a loved one or what have you, or just like have a group of coworkers or something like that get together and have a good time out on the river. I don't think that they should have to mix their groups with other groups. I think that socially we are designed to roll with our tribe.
Mhm.
So let's keep the tribe together. So I only do private tours. I also think that people deserve to take their vacation on their own schedule. So I do them by appointment only. I don't have tour times. But I also, given my passion for mental health, I have beyond just taking people out to the river to snorkel, paddleboard, or to free dive, because I design tours with all those components. Um, if people want to get nice pictures, I'll make sure that I select sites during their trip that have that clear water, the shallower water, and the underwater vegetation, the animals that they want to see, whatever excites them about their visit to Florida. I'm just going to take it and I'm going to multiply it by like 50, just to make sure that they get what they want in spades. I can't guarantee you're going to see a manatee or something like that. If that's, I don't have them on speed dial. But I can take you to the spots where it's most likely and wait for the magic to happen. And then in addition to that, I also like to do like a la carte add-ons. So if you yeah, you can like grab an add-on for the photography package or for like a yoga session with me, or we can do breath work. I can teach you a little bit about freediving breath work, lead you through a session or something like that while you're on the tour. We can incorporate it. So those are some of the extra things that I offer on the tours.
So, and with the area, so Aquatrek, you're everything in the Springs. So pretty much like the Orlando-ish Springs all the way up to Gainesville, right?
Yeah, the springs that I tour are generally located as the Gulf of Mexico turns downwards to the from the panhandle.
Okay.
Then that little pocket, that 90-degree turn, that's Springs country.
Okay.
So I've got 60, 70 different sites around that Central Florida area that, this is the world's largest concentration of freshwater springs. So when a
I
freediver
know.
hears that,
Yeah.
that's just like, okay, it's like seeing a McDonald's with a different playground. You're like, ooh, that's a cool looking playground. Let's see the next one. Let's see the next one.
Oh, I researched. There's 1,000 freshwater springs in Florida.
And
Um,
counting.
yeah, and not all of them are like diveable. Some of them are quite small, but 1,000, like there are so many to choose from. So people just tell you what they would hope to see and the kind of experience they'd like to have, and you just give them a bunch of options and they pick and choose. Yeah.
Yeah, and another funny thing that a lot of people don't realize about the springs is like just how much water is coming out of them every day. Like for example, you look at Niagara Falls, it's like 40 to I think it's like 57 million gallons a day or something like that.
Okay.
And there's an entire category of springs out of those 1,100 springs that you're talking about. There's an entire category of them that in order to get into that category, you have to pump out more than 64 million gallons of water every day. So that means if you turn Niagara Falls upside down and put
Yeah.
it underground, you've almost got our first magnitude springs. Almost.
See, and that's the other thing too about you is you're not only super knowledgeable with freediving and instruction, like you're so knowledgeable about these springs and even the different species that are up there. I remember in my time with you, like I found it really amazing that the spring that we chose to dive, before we even got in the water, you gave us like a tour of the grounds and you knew the history of the spring and you knew the conservation issues facing that spring. And I've never experienced that before where you actually allowed us to like connect with the spring before we dove it. And it kind of gives you that time to come down and really relax. I don't know. It was just, it was very unique. It's a very
Yeah.
different type of experience. And I genuinely loved it. So your
Thank
knowledge is it's off the charts with everything up there. And I thought you grew up there and that's why you knew all this stuff. So now I'm realizing you didn't grow up there. You just
Yeah.
assimilated all of this in a relatively short amount of time. So it's really cool.
I gotta credit probably my academic experience in college and the masters, but also Georgia Aquarium and SeaWorld for that because I had to learn everything there was to know about every single fish, every animal, every turtle in that aquarium and spit it back out for the guests. And I
Um,
learned A, it's okay to admit when you don't know something. B, listen to your guests. They're going to ask those questions that you need to learn the answer to. If you can answer those questions, then you're going to be okay. Like not everyone's going to ask you what's the incubation period of a green sea turtle's eggs.
how long?
Oh, why waste your time on that? Focus more on the 30 to 60 days, I
There we
think.
go.
I have to go back. It's been a while since I taught about sea turtles. But if you take that philosophy and you apply it to the springs, I was able to assimilate a lot of this knowledge through my education efforts with my nonprofit. Because we were making videos, we were teaching people about the springs. So I wanted to gobble up all that information as much as I could. And because I was teaching about the springs for my nonprofit, I got exposure to a lot of those questions that people want to know the answers to.
Mm.
But still, even you asked questions on your tour that I
Yeah.
didn't know the answer to. And what
Really?
did I,
I
yeah,
don't
remember the
remember.
little silverfish and rainbow?
Which ones?
Shad, I think, is the one that we were looking at. But I remember you asked about a fish. I didn't know what it was. And I actually came back around and researched it because it bothered me that I didn't know.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, now I probably have a photo or something that I took of it. I'll have to find.
I would say I would go back in my text messages, but part and parcel of being an aquatic tour guide is that you go through your phones pretty fast. So I've lost
Oh,
all
lost
my
it.
contacts in yeah. I got a shiny new phone now.
Yeah, now your iPhone.
Yeah, and I switched from Android to iPhone, which was another big headache. So talk about learning a lot in a short period of time. Yeah.
But yeah, you're looping back your species ID and your species info. That was great because I nerd out when I'm out there. I want to
Yeah,
know
me too.
all of the things, and you definitely filled like that. Just the whole experience with you was really great. The free diving and then the river day. Um, so
Yeah.
moving on to my next burning question, conservation. I really wanted to talk to you about. So I'm becoming more and more aware of all of the problems that are in Florida right now, and a lot going on with like the drainage of Lake Okeechobee and how it's affecting everything down here. But I know up there by you guys, you have like a whole separate slew of issues going on, and I know that
Mhm.
you're really involved now with, or have always been with the conservation up there. So I wanted to, as best you can, like have you give in a nutshell, like what are the main contributors to the issues going on? And then what does that look like? Like what's
Yeah,
the effect on the springs?
sure. If you go to the conservation experts in different states, especially those developing, I don't know if you I just heard a figure this week that in 2023, Alachua County, which is the county I live in, um, was the fastest growing county in the state and perhaps even in the country. And you're looking at other counties growing 1 or 2 or 3% in a year.
Yeah.
Some shrinking. Some of the southern Florida counties are shrinking by 2 or 3%. Alachua County grew by 22% last year.
Wow. Okay.
So I could stop there, but I won't. I'm
Yeah.
going to tell
Right.
you. Yeah, I'm going to tell you more about it. So, as we develop land in general, it doesn't matter if it's Florida Springs or Georgia mountains or what, we're going to be adding more draws on the water supply. And we're going to be also adding the need to grow the food for the population, which means more land's going to be converted over into farmland. And you're going to see, whether it's through livestock or through the exposure of the soil to fertilizers,
Mhm.
you're going to see the nitrates in that water supply that you are taxing through pooling. You're going to see the concentration of those nitrates go up.
Okay.
Okay. Um, so it sounds like having more nutrients in your water would be a good thing.
But you think it'd be good, like, oh, now all of my plants are going to do better, or yeah. So let's talk about where it ends up and what happens.
Well, not only is it being added to the water, it's also being concentrated in the water as we pump more water out.
Okay.
So those two things are happening, and in Florida, they're happening very fast because we live on a limestone bedrock plain that is karst topography, which means that there's a lot of cracks in that limestone. A lot of them are vertical and a lot of them are horizontal, but essentially what it means is we're living on a giant sponge. So it's not going to roll across our landscape. It's going to settle in and it's going to be pumped back out from back pressure in the water as the aquifer pushes from the northern parts of the state, pushes that fertilizer out into the springs. Now, it's not just fertilizer. You're looking at septic tanks that have been out of, they should have been out of commission a long time ago in different people's properties, industrial use. But my point is nitrates are getting into the water. And when they get pumped out into the springs, historically, the water that's coming out of the springs is nutrient dead. And it's very, very hard water. It's got a lot of minerals in it, but not a lot of nutrients. So you get this clear water coming out of the springs, and because it's still clear. Nitrates or not, it's going to be clear. But what's happening is we used to have a lot more complex plants in these spring basins. This
Okay.
is where it gets specific to Florida because these environments are microenvironments. So, for example, there are species like in Ichitucknee, there's the coffee spring system that there's a species of snail there that only lives there in the whole world.
Huh.
It's just that one spring. So, and you're talking, you could throw a football across the spring easily. I could bat a football across the spring with my elbow. That's how small it is. So
Okay.
when you have a micro environment like that, you're kind of depending on the complex plants to form the ground level of the ecosystem. You got to turn sunlight into sugar somehow. So these plants are doing that. And then you've got, in addition to providing nutrition, these plants are also providing shelter for small fish.
Okay.
So when you get the nitrates coming out of that spring, what it allows to happen as that flow in the spring goes down, as the nitrates go up, slower water's coming out. It's not shooting out as fast. And it's allowing these cyanobacteria or algae of different types to settle on top of those plants and grow. It's got the nutrition it needs. It's got lower flow. The plants aren't whipping around as much. So you're seeing growth. And they cover the plants. They choke them out of sunlight. They choke them out of oxygen. Those plants die. And then the algae doesn't care. It just drops down to the floor and coats the floor and starts to grow up from the floor. So what you're seeing is like it's almost like a new president got elected. All of the plants that used to run the show are gone. Now sunlight's hitting the bacteria and the algae, and that is what's growing at the bottom level. But none of our ecosystem animals or plants have adapted to taking advantage of that algae.
Right. So it's not a food source for any of them. It just sits there. And what's
Well,
interesting, yeah, I didn't realize that our springs weren't supposed to be like white sand with the blue water. And then I've seen some of these restored springs, like at Gilchrist Blue. I think it's called Naked Spring. Yeah,
naked spring, yeah.
Naked Spring. So the restoration on that, even just in the past couple of years, these systems must be pretty resilient because I looked in there just a couple weeks ago and there's no white sandy bottom. Like it is lush and it's not algae and it's amazing
Really
what's
good.
going on in there in comparison to like I went by Silver Glen and it's all sand and then just these big clumps, matted algae just rolling along the bottom.
Yeah.
It's really
Maybe Silver Glen would have a chance if it was allowed a couple growing seasons without people stepping in there for the complex plants to get a foothold. But you're talking death from a thousand cuts here.
right. No, and it's so funny, like unpopular opinion, like Blue Springs shut down to swimmers to let that run recover and to let the manatees in there, and they're going to rotate that now, right? They're going to close it down for a year or two and then open it back up.
They are going to be doing some renovations at that spring.
Okay.
They're sweeping restorations that they're well funded. They're going to make a big difference in the erosion of that spring. Uh,
Okay.
a byproduct of that is going to be shutting down that run because they're going to be constructing a walkway back out to the river
Oh, I
there.
didn't realize that. Okay, I thought they were doing it for the primary purpose being people not going in there, but I was talking with one of my dive friends and I was like, they just need to rotate this across the board. Like it'll be a very unpopular opinion, but to shut it down, let it recover, and then almost like how you would rotate a crop field, like you just
Yes.
go through them. And obviously, I think the problem will be money, right? Because it's always about money. And the privately owned ones, I mean, what would be the incentive there? You know?
Yeah. COVID was interesting because, a lot of these changes have been being talked about for a long time by people who really care. One of the things that I think is a problem with the conservation community is we care a lot and we assume that other people don't care.
Mm.
They do. They're just trying to operate. These people are trying to do their jobs in the confines of their circumstances. If these were easy problems, we would have already solved them by now. If you can walk down the street and say, "Hey, I don't like that. I want to fix that." Sure, but you got to be in it to see what some of the other factors are. So I do have a lot of native trust within me for some of the people who run some of these parks, and one of the best examples of it is Ichitucknee's North Run.
Mhm.
Uh, it used to have tubers in it. It used to have a lot of that white sand. When I first started coming here, that's what I was seeing. But since COVID, they've taken away the ability for people to go down the top half of the river on tubes. You can start at the south entrance now, but that's it.
Okay.
What happened? Well, a giant explosion of eelgrass, massive, a total, like huge recovery of those runs up there. They're unrecognizable.
Yeah, in just such a short period of time too, just a few years, and it just comes right back. Yeah, it's really
Nature
interesting.
can recover.
No, I wholeheartedly believe that. It's going to take the right people to make the right decisions. And yeah, I don't know. I guess I mean, my next question would be then, as far as a call to action, because I hate telling people what's going on and then not giving them like, hey, here's how you can help. I mean, can you think of ways that people can get involved? I mean, even if it's emailing or phone calls to
Oh,
people,
yeah.
like, what would be your best bet?
There's a ton of different ways based on your capabilities and based on your interests. Like me as a freediver, one of the things that I will do all the time, I advocate for treating the floor of these systems as an organism. You
Mhm.
wouldn't step on your dog's tail, so don't step on the eelgrass. It is a living thing. Everything on the bottom is a sensitive ecosystem, so please, fins up.
Yeah.
And spreading that within your community is going to be helpful. But if you're looking for more of a political change, I would say getting involved with some of the leadership organizations right now that are pushing Springs research and pushing pro Springs litigation. There are nonprofits, there are interest groups that are fighting this fight, and you can join them. Some of the ones that we have nearby that I would recommend would be Florida Springs Florida Springs Council, FSC.
Okay.
Um, they are currently actively litigating.
Yeah,
That's
and
what
they're
they're
really good with their emails. I'm on their email list, and they send out. I want to say it's almost like a weekly update on what's going on.
sure. And if they weren't part of the conversation, then we wouldn't be, we wouldn't be hearing about these issues so much. So they're doing a great work over there. And then we have the it's so funny, man. Can't believe I'm forgetting the name of this other organization. This Florida Springs Council, Florida Springs Institute,
Okay,
FSI.
Florida Food Institute.
FSI, they're some of the people who taught me about the springs in the first place. I would go to their classes, they have free classes. I would learn about different parts of the ecosystem. I would get exposed to science. They do a lot, like their organization focuses mostly on generating science, which is so important in order to win litigation, in order to change people's opinions. So that's another really important organization to check out.
Okay.
Yeah.
So Florida Springs Council and Florida Springs Institute, and wherever I post this content, I'll be sure to link to both of those as well as your stuff.
Yes. And without getting too much into this, because this is a huge can of worms, but the people who make decisions on whether or not you can get a permit to pump water out of the ground in Florida,
yeah.
there's 5 different districts of water management, and you have to apply for a permit through them. And the people who will review your permit are elected by, or they're not elected at all. They're appointed by the governor. And right now, they're all real estate developers. They're all construction folks. There's, well, I think maybe one out of everyone has, 10 to 15 different members, but I think right now we only have one environmental scientist up there.
Interesting.
And if you look at the percentage of the permits that they pass, it's beyond 99%. It's 99.85% of permits that are being applied for in some of these districts are being passed, which is
Wow.
like alarm,
A little
alarm.
mind blowing. Yeah. Yeah.
Can we encourage these folks to maybe deny a few permits, maybe even consider denying a few permits? Because right now it's open season on the water that's below our feet because we can't see it. If we had a giant way to visualize, if we had like a rain gauge of the water in the aquifer, I think we'd probably be pretty worried by now. How much has come out.
Right. And then that decreased flow, again, looping it back to how it affects, the natural flora or plant life there, which then ultimately you're impacting everything that eats that base layer.
Yeah.
It really is
Or dry up.
Yeah.
Like I could sit here and I could list springs that have dried up and reversed their flow and they're just gone. Like there's a chain link fence, there's some barbed wire, and there's a dry hole in the ground.
Wow.
Yeah, that is enough to make you cry.
And I feel like awareness is such a big issue too. I feel like freediving is such a great community to get involved here and to be a good voice and to spread this awareness, because we can go and like document these things. When you think of Florida and you think of springs, you think about the ones that we've talked about, right? The very pretty photogenic ones, but Yeah, how great though for us to maybe start documenting what's going on with those springs or with the sandy bottoms, in contrast to like Naked Spring that's been
Yeah.
recovered. I think that would be really great for anybody who's up there to do the extra work and maybe go find some of these devastated areas and just share that content. I think
Mhm.
we're really unaware as to what's going on.
One of the guys who did it best through photography was John Moran.
Okay.
Looking at John Moran's photography, he's got a then and now series where he takes the same shot at the same angle at different years, and it is crazy. A lot of we might have a lot of freedivers watching this podcast who might be surprised to know that Troy Springs was as blue as Gilchrist.
Yeah, that was something you told me that I was shocked by because when I said like, oh yeah, let's go check out those emerald green waters, like I just thought it was just always emerald green. And then you gave me that backstory, that history of like it's pretty much just one of the most not infected springs, but the most
Impacted.
what's the word I'm
It's it's polluted. It's impacted. There's farms that have kind of encroached all around it, and
right.
they're getting hit with that local drainage of nitrate rich water.
And it's not even anything that's happened in the last couple of years. This dates back, for decades. We're seeing the effects of all of that stuff now. And it's like we're kind of just making things so much worse and we're not even seeing the full effects of it. We're not going to see that for years to come. And it's going to be pretty scary when all of that comes to play.
Sad. I've been involved with some of the dive community who's been here since the 70s, like older folks, 60s, and and I'm I'm jealous that I didn't get to see the springs the way they did. But on the other hand, I know how much I care about the springs and that water. And if I had seen what they had seen, and now I was looking at the springs, I feel like it would be hard to get out of bed in the morning. I'd be like, no, we've lost so much. I'm so sad. It's how I feel about coral bleaching too. I would have loved to see the Great Barrier Reef 30 years ago.
Any of
You
these,
know?
even right off Pompano Beach here, it's really it's interesting every time we go out. Every year, I see changes, drastic
Yeah,
changes. So it's I don't know, it's depressing actually when you think about it. But I guess taking that and running with it and knowing that there is some stuff that we can do and there are some people we can contact and
yeah,
again spreading the visuals of what's going on, I think will really help. Um, and also just encouraging people who are listening to this who haven't visited the springs to go and see them. Like they're so easily accessible. And I've learned that people protect the things that they care about. So my goal here would be to get people to start caring and start appreciating, and then we'll have a bigger support group to protect.
absolutely. Recognize there's a problem, but also we can recognize that nature's resilience and its ability to bounce back in some of the springs that we've seen. I know if we just give it a chance, um, you know, it's going to be just fine. People ask me what I think our springs are going to look like in, 30 or 40 years. And I prefer the optimistic viewpoint that they're going to be crystal clear, blue, and full of life because I'm hoping that we're just going to do something about it. We're just going
Yeah,
to get better.
yeah, I sure hope so. Because man, they're beautiful, and I can't imagine seeing them come back more than where they're at right now. That'd be
Yeah.
great.
Isn't it cool that we can look back and be like, hey, like when I first moved here, Naked Springs was just that. It was sand. It was naked.
Yeah,
And now it looks like a confetti explosion coral reef of aquatic vegetation now.
yeah.
Yes.
Honestly, in just a couple years, and yeah, the fact that it's attainable, I think is what we need to remind ourselves of. It's right there.
Maybe in 15 years, we're going to have a new set of documentaries that instead of talking about how sad and horrible things are, maybe the documentaries that are going to be coming out in 10 or 15 years are going to be taught, hey, these guys had to figure it out, but they did. And now maybe they'll all be success stories. That would be cool. I would love to see a future like that.
We'll see. I like your optimism. I'm
Gotta
on
have some.
that. I have faith.
Gotta have it. If you want to get
Yeah,
out of bed in the morning, you gotta have it.
for sure. If not, just go for a dive. You'll feel better afterwards.
Yeah. Please come back up.
Yes, that. Yeah, come back up
Yeah,
always.
yeah.
Well, thank you again so much for talking with me today. And before we conclude, like, was there anything that you wanted to talk about that we didn't touch on? Was there any more you'd like to add?
Well, there's there's so much to talk about with Florida. I'm extremely passionate about our state and its, natural history and what our state has gone through from being under, like a lot of people don't know that like we used to be about 200 feet underwater or more in this area when the ocean was higher. And sure, there's a lot of changes happening in the world right now, and there always have been a lot of changes happening on this planet. But I just hope that people do what you tell them to do. I hope that they go out and explore the state parks that we've got. We've got so many good ones around here. Cost $3, $6 to get in. Cheap
Yeah.
fun.
Yeah.
Get outside.
Yeah, and
That
if
would
you
be
don't know where to start, I mean, contact either one of us. You can contact me through this podcast. You can comment. I'm going to be putting Dave's information in the commentary. I mean, guys, reach out. Where you are a wealth of information, and you've always been very open with where to go, for what to see, and I'm the same. I'm definitely here to spread the joy.
It's been a pleasure.
Yeah, this was so fun. Thank you for catching up, and I look forward to diving with you soon, I hope, and then
Of
possibly
course.
having you back on here in the near future and talking about maybe some progress that's been made or some updates. Who knows?
Sure. Maybe I can do a little bit more in-depth talk about freediving or something like that, techniques and such.
Yeah, I
We'll
think
scratch
that would be great. Yeah, I'd love to get you on here for that because your tips and tricks, I mean, I have found them very helpful. So,
Yeah, it's better than just saying, "Hey, how do I pop my ears?" Oh, you go like this.
right. Yeah, agreed.
Well, it's been a privilege to be here. Thank you so much for inviting me.
You're so welcome. All right, Dave, talk to you soon.
Another huge thank you to Dave for joining me on this podcast episode. I thoroughly enjoyed that conversation, and I definitely look forward to having him on here again in the future. So if you enjoyed this conversation as much as I did, it would be really great if you could follow the podcast, if you could leave a review, and for those of you on YouTube, subscribe, like, do all the things. It really helps this little podcast gain some traction. So thanks again for tuning in, and hoping that you'll tune in next week where we're going to dive into the mythical side of freediving. So stay tuned for that fun conversation. Thanks again for joining on the Plunge with Purpose podcast, where we talk about all things freediving in the ocean and the springs.